This is Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort. Good to be with you on another edition of the world's leading transit executive podcast, Transit Unplugged, in depth this week with our special guest, Dave McKenna, CEO of Rocky Mountaineer, coming to us from Vancouver, Canada. Dave, thanks so much for being a guest on our program today.
It's absolutely a pleasure, Paul, and great to be here from beautiful Vancouver.
There you go. And you were telling me you're waiting for the snow, right?
We are. It's a bit of a rare event out here on the West Coast, but good news. I grew up in the central part of Canada. Snow is my friend.
There you go. On Transit Unplugged, we talk about public transit, trains, buses, and all the latest technology, but we've never really focused on excursion trains before. And this is an opportunity to talk about that. Dave, you're CEO of one of the world's leading excursion trains with operations in Vancouver and here in the U.S., in Denver, where I rode the Rockies to the Red Rocks route recently, which took us from Denver out through Glenwood Springs and to Moab, Utah, through the beautiful Rocky Mountains. And I got to tell you, it was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had, Dave. Just a phenomenal experience. I'm still have goosebumps about it now 6 weeks after I was on it. Just phenomenal, man.
You know, I think that thank you first. Thank you very much for that. The team does just such a remarkable job. And they are pioneers, you know, the team down there working on that route because they're building it from the ground up. But it is remarkable how rail really, and I'm somewhat new to rail. You looked at my bio. I've been in tourism my whole life, but new to this excursion rail. And it is remarkable to me. I think the engineers have the best view of both Canada and the US of anybody around. Like, you see things that you just cannot see in any other way.
It was phenomenal, actually. Carl, who is your manager down there, took us up to the front. We were able to sit in the cab with the engineers, and you're right. What a phenomenal view. And what a phenomenal service to take rail. And, coming out of the pandemic now, people, I think, are exploding with energy. They want to have experiences. They want to go out and experience life. I always say mobility is the opposite of a lockdown. And so this is the experience of mobility, but also a tourism experience like none other I've been on. Tell us about Rocky Mountaineer.
Well, I like to tell people that Rocky Mountaineer is the overnight success that took 18 years. It started in 1990 when there was some deregulation going on in the passenger rail service here in Canada. And Peter Armstrong, who was our founder, had the idea, so there was a route that was being decommissioned that went from Vancouver to Banff, Alberta. And most people know Banff. It's idyllic, Canada's first national park, UNESCO World Heritage Site. So spectacular. And so he said, well, I'll put together a train and I'll run that out, Vancouver. And he was in the sightseeing business prior to that. And, through various iterations, it had measures of success. And then when we introduced our first bi-level domes, so which we now call the Gold Leaf cars, that particular route just took off. And we really haven't looked back since that time. And to that point this year, we had roughly 97,000 guests ride the rails with us and have this life-changing 2-day experience looking at some of the most iconic scenery in Canada and US that you can find.
Yeah, the route we took was phenomenal. Coming from Denver, I was actually wrapping up a conference, which is the American Public Transit Association Tech Conference, and then to ride this amazing technologically advanced service, but that took me back in my mind to, I felt like I was riding, in the 1880s, going out west into cowboy country, and was able to actually stay overnight in Glenwood Springs at what I would call a cowboy hotel. Just wild, just such a great experience. It reminded me of being a kid where my dad and I used to watch an old Western TV show where they would ride the trains, the Wild Wild West, it was called. I don't know if you remember that with Robert Conrad.
Yeah, I mean, you can't extract train travel from the pioneering spirit. It opened up both Canada and the US. Without those rail links from coast to coast, who knows how the countries would have been set up back in the day. And so actually, your observation is really interesting, Paul, because that's exactly the vibe that we're trying to give people as they join it. We have in Canada, we have First Passage to the West.
Okay.
We have Journey Through the Clouds, which is the route that goes from Vancouver to Jasper. Rainforest to Gold Rush. And then, of course, Rockies to the Red Rocks. And so it's always an homage to that spirit of exploration and looking. Like, could you imagine what it was like for the first people, like the people building the rails, coming into one of those canyons and going, holy cow, like the scenery was just incredible. And to be the first people to lay eyes on it would have been remarkable. And now I think our guests get to see it like this. It's privileged access. Like, really, unless you were a professional railroader, there are certain areas of the Colorado River down in the US you would never be able to see. The Hopi Steppes you'd never be able to see unless you were doing that. And I think that's the magic of it. It brings people back. There's a romance to it. That freedom to be able to get up and move around, which you don't get on a plane. I think you stack all those things up with spectacular scenery, places that people save up their entire life to go and look at and experience. I think when you stack all those things up and then we pepper it in with some incredible food, wonderful wine pairings and beverage program, I think that's it. It takes the 2 days, and just like you, well, people rave about it afterwards. And frankly, word of mouth is our single biggest sales tool.
Yeah, I don't know if Carolyn told you, but just a little quick post I put up on Instagram Reels on the train. It's gone viral, has over 650,000 views around the world. Yeah, it's the biggest thing I've ever posted personally. Hit more people, and I think it just speaks to how an experience on rail outside through the experience of the Rockies. And I play piano, and so Carl took there's a couple cars we have on the one here in the U.S. One of them's like a smooth jazz style car. It's cool. And the other one's like a warm, Western style, with the bar at the end and the piano. So I got to play that, and that got thousands of views as well. But my point is that it really speaks. I think it grabs the heart of people. Let's talk about the experience a little bit before we kind of dig in behind the scenes. For me, we were picked up, in the morning. We went out, a bus took us out to a special spot where we got on the vehicle. Even that welcoming experience, your staff was so warm and welcoming, made us all feel, a part of it. You let your bags go and you never have to worry with them again, which is another great amenity that I think we can learn from in the transit industry some. And then, getting on the train, having a tour guide kind of guide you through where you're going. I remember one spot, he said, up there's where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were hiding from, all those memories keep coming back in your mind. And the food, as you mentioned, they're constantly serving you food. It's like going on a cruise, you say, hey, this mountain air is making my clothes shrink, but it's really all the great food you're eating and the drinks, phenomenal. And the friendliness of the staff and the things you see. You never get bored. There's not a lot of good cell signal up there, but I didn't want to be looking at my cell phone. The windows which go up to the ceiling, where you can see spectacular views of the Rockies and the water. And Dave, it was just phenomenal. And then the overnight experience there in Glenwood Springs, where we got to go and actually, my buddy Marcelo and I, who was with me, a colleague at work, we went out and got to go into the hot springs that evening.
Perfect.
Iron Mountain hot springs and all the different temperatures of the pools. We got up to 105 degrees. That's the most I could put up with, but they went up to 109. And of course, the great thing was we had snow that morning. We woke up, it was still dark outside. It was snow. It was like, this is amazing. And then the rest of the ride into Moab, just phenomenal. Dave, tell us about the experience, what it is you're going for and what people say about it.
Well, I think you just described it extremely well. Yes. I think the larger idea here is we live very busy lives. We're always on the go, and the experience going through airports and even taking transit or Uber, whatever you're doing, like life is very fast right now. So we like to think that we're offering the opportunity to kind of slow that all down just a little bit. And, Peter used to talk about in Canada when we first started the journeys that we moved at the speed of Kodak, which is a great reference for those of us that have a little bit of gray in our hairs. For some of my younger team, they're like, what's that? Yeah. But I think it's the whole idea is that we can just slow things down a little bit and we're not in a rush to get anywhere. And so the scenery isn't whizzing past you. We're going by at slower speeds, so you can really take
Yes.
it all in.
Yes.
And frankly, there's certain areas on the trip where UP in the States, great partner, great partner, will allow us to slow down so that we can, when there's a particularly spectacular piece, we'll slow right down, take it all in. And if we have to duck out of the route of the freight's coming or whatever, we'll do that. We'll decide, you know what? It's okay. We're all right to be on a side because we're looking around and we're enjoying that.
That's right.
So it's really about that slowing in our lives, and the fact that on most of the journeys, at best, I think any one of our routes, the best cell signal is around 60% of the route. It's fabulous. People drop their instruments, their phones, their iPads, and then they sit there and they start talking to each other. And if they do have their iPads out, they're reading their book. Like, when's the last time you had the luxury of just being able to sit back with a glass of wine and read a book and have beautiful scenery go by? And so I think, people deserve that in their lives, particularly when they've worked really hard. Most of our guests are empty nesters. They've raised their families, have worked hard their whole lives, and it's about time we do something really nice for them to say thank you for everything that they've contributed.
Yeah.
And so this is our little way of giving it back.
That's wonderful. Yeah. It's like a cruise on steel wheels. So,
It is.
yeah, speaking of that tourism part of it, Dave, you've spent your career really focused on tourism. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to this position.
Sure. Well, I studied genetics at university. I love telling this story. It inspires my gang here. But I studied genetics at university and went out to ski for 6 weeks in Banff in between, and never went home. I just fell in love with the mountains.
Wow.
Fell in love with the resort style, and talked to my dad. God bless him, and he was a great guy. And he just said, "Look, you know what? Whatever makes you happy, because life is going to be long. So I want you to be happy, son." And so then I just decided I needed to make a career. And I never really worked in hospitality. I did a little bartending at university, as everyone does. But I, managed to carve out a great path working at ski resorts in Canada and New Zealand, doing ski patrol. And then that led me into some restaurants. And then I really like the hotel industry. When you get into these big resort hotels, there's a real magic to those. There's a feel. It's really about that focus on the guest. And when they roll up to the front door, their name and you are using their name through their entire experience. And you really work as a team to deliver that. And that led me through from hotels. I took on, when I was working for Pursuit, took on some attractions, which were really interesting. And that led me naturally to where I am today. But, Paul, this is my first rail experience. And as I mentioned earlier, I am really, really, I've done the trip in Canada as a customer. But I'm really, really enamored with what this does, how it changes people's lives. And our new route in the US, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg. For Americans have this thirst to explore their amazing, beautiful places. And we have the ability to help them, go and see those and explore those, even if they're not climbing mountains or rafting rivers anymore. We can still get them into some of these incredible places. So, this hospitality thing, it's in my blood. If I'm on the train, I'm picking up glasses. You just can't help yourself. Serving wine, of course. But, I think every day, people ask me why I do what I do. I really actually believe that, in the hospitality sector, and it doesn't really matter what part of it you're in, when we're entertaining people from around the world and introducing them to new cultures, Canada and US, we have cultures, and we're introducing people to a different way of thinking and different way of experiencing things, and introducing them maybe to some indigenous content that they would never otherwise have a reason to do. Well, when we do those things, I believe that people can't undo those experiences. They can't undo what they've learned. And so therefore they go back to home, wherever that is, maybe a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more appreciative of how, maybe not everything was as set in stone as I once thought. And when you achieve that openness, I think that's the beginning of making the world a safer place. So at the end of the day, I truly believe that every single day I get up and make the world a slightly better place. And that's my life goal.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's like like you and I were talking about beforehand, the Simon Sinek, the why, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the team here, like to motivate people to provide an awesome hospitality service, there are skills to do that. But the biggest skill is in your heart. Like you really have to care. You have to have that deep empathy for the guest and just desire to show them this amazing time. And, a lot of our hosts, they stay in touch with guests and they write them, and send them Christmas cards and everything for years. So the hosts that have been working with us for, almost 2 decades, they have quite the Christmas card list that comes up every year. It's marvelous.
Yeah. Rocky Mountaineer definitely goes the extra mile, I think, pun intended, on a lot of areas. One of the things that Carl Atencio, your general manager there, had told me about, and we saw it with our own eyes, was that you are at the U.S. operation using a higher safety standard on the rail than even what's required by law for that type of train. And I showed us, the standards, the inspections, the maintenance. And I love the fact that you've got, a mechanic on the train with you going there. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, it's phenomenal.
So first, Carl is, he's one of our great rock stars. And I'll tell you what, he's incredibly well-renowned and thought of in the railroad industry.
Yes, he is.
And he was doing, sort of the class 1, but then he was also doing some transit as well. That's around the Denver area. But, I think that it's our whole philosophy. Like why go in and do the standard, the minimum standard, if you can go in and be really, really good. And, my worst day ever is going to be the day where, one of our employees or one of our guests gets hurt on one of the trains. So let's just try whatever we can to avoid that and make sure that the journey is nothing but pleasant. We have operated accident free since we started doing that trip down in Denver, 2 years now, 2 seasons. And I believe we're at almost 600 days in Canada without a workplace injury in our main rail yard. We have a massive shop where we do all of our own work on our carriages and locomotives. And, so that's something I'm really proud of because that means the team are taking care of each other.
When I was riding, I have over 30 years in public transit, trains and buses and ran trains, commuter trains, big, diesel engines into Washington, D.C., commuter service. So I'm familiar with a lot of the rules and regulations and how we run commuter service. One of the parts of public transportation that was severely impacted by the pandemic was commuter trains because people have changed their work style, where they're hybrid work schedules, Tuesday through Thursday cities, they're calling them now. But I think there's things we could learn, Dave, from excursion trains. And my mind is always, I'm an inductive thinker. So I was pulling it together. Well, we should do this. We should do that. Lessons I was learning while I was on your train, thinking about how I could, take that back and share that with my friends who run commuter services around the world. One of the things was, I thought, like you mentioned, the care and attention paid to the passenger. That's a lesson that we're learning in the transit and commuter train industry, is that these aren't just riders, they're customers. And as a matter of fact, the American Public Transit Association did a survey last year, and it became the number one KPI, the number one key performance indicator that transit systems are focused on now is the customer experience. Tell us about that focus you have on customer experience and how it's expressed on a day-to-day basis. And then I want to get into the food because I thought that was phenomenal too.
Okay. Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I think that there's post pandemic here, there's lots of opportunity for us to rethink how things work. Even, I'm here we have a beautiful office, 2 floors at 980 Howe Street in downtown Vancouver. And we're not full every day like we used to be. So we're getting a little bit creative about how to make the office environment a place where you choose to come into versus have to come into. And so I think the same thing can be translated all the way around. I think the way to start is in our work, we start with something called the guest journey or the customer journey profile. And it's a marketing thing, but you really start with who your demographic is. And then you really think about it from even to the point of when they're researching you online or at the travel agency, where you start to set the tone and try to understand what their expectations are. As you can imagine, we can do a great job on the train, but if it's a clunky booking process or awkward, then that's going to affect. So, our guest journey is end to end from the time they start the research to maybe even 6 months after travel, where we try to stay in touch with them and find out, what their experience was like, and of course see if they might want to do another experience with us if they're fans like yourself. So it's really understanding then a deep understanding of what the needs are. And if you can, I think the magic of luxury travel is you can anticipate the needs of your client, your guest. Think about someone coming to your home. You're thinking about, well, they might need towels and they might need this and they might need that. So why is it any different on one of these trains? So you have to anticipate someone's coming from India and they're going to be riding this rail. What are the little things we can do to show that we've really thought about them and their experience, and provide them that before they even have to ask for it? That's the magic. When you hit those little magic buttons, that's when things really start clicking for people. And anticipating what might interest people in terms of the experience on board the train, when the scenery is spectacular outside, pointing out, not overdoing it with information, but giving them those one or two little quotes like you have that you take home and you tell all your friends about.
That's right.
So there's a science. There's definitely a science to it. Disney is fantastic.
Yes.
People talk about the Disneyfication of things, but I'm actually a big fan of Disney because they did the science. They've done the research. You can go to the Disney Institute down in Orlando, and you will learn that, at least it used to be, that garbage cans at a Disney theme park are no more than 22 feet away from each other, because at 11 feet, you are 50% more apt to drop something on the ground than to walk to the bin to put it in. Like, that's science.
Yes.
So, it's not always about the mouse. There's really a whole bunch of really amazing work they've done. Also, when you think about queuing and about creating that sense of adventure, how do you do that in a long queue? Well, I think that's where the science can come in, and that can translate through really any experience that we're trying to offer people. It's just, again, anticipating their needs. And then when you deliver that without them even having to think about it, at the end of it, they're just like, wow, like that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, especially in these days in the post-COVID world, where, in my opinion, we've had a severe degradation of customer service and many commercial experiences. I mean, I emailed someone this morning, a company this morning, because I received a little item in the mail, and I emailed them and told them an issue I had with it, and I got an automated response saying, "We'll get back to you in a few days." It didn't used to be that way, or when you call in and they're like, I called in a major store the other day, and they were like, "Sorry, we don't answer our phones anymore. You need to get to us on," just those kind of things. And so having that kind of service, when I sat down on your train, and then having someone come and put down the table in front of me and put out a white napkin on it, a cloth napkin, and begin the meal service, which was multi-course while I'm sitting on the train. I mean, phenomenal, Dave. Tell us about how you make that work on the food side of things.
Well, there's a science and a magic to that, as well as anybody that's been on a train with a galley. You don't have a lot of room. You don't have a lot of water. You don't have a lot of things that you would normally have in a commercial kitchen. I've actually built a 5-diamond restaurant at one point in my career, which was fascinating. But the resources that go into doing that are phenomenal. And now we're trying to deliver that same experience on a train. And my hat's off to the team. They do a remarkable job, particularly our galley hosts, who are putting together the meals in those tight spaces. Like, talk about, if you ever wanted to hire someone who knows something about efficiency, go and talk to one of our galley hosts, because they'll show you. But a lot of the work, the mise en place and whatnot, is done offsite. So we have some caterers and other people that help us prep that. As you can imagine, we can't be dicing carrots on a train. And then the meals are really worked on. So right now we're in the process of experimentation over the winter, and we will iterate until we get it absolutely right. And I think that the big thing for, we introduced it this year, but next year we're going to work a little bit more on the wine and food pairings, not for breakfast, but when we get into the lunch and the dinner services, there's a great opportunity there to really round out the experience. And food and beverage pairings don't necessarily have to be alcohol as well, right? Like it's sometimes the beverage that you're drinking really brings out the flavor of the food and vice versa. And so we have some really talented people that are working on that. And then once we get the design, now we have to compartmentalize it down to something we can deliver on the train. So in the US, on the single level domes that you had that great experience on, we have the small galleys on the bi-level domes in Canada. We actually designed the galley a little bit bigger, and we're doing a lot more à la minute right there on the train. We have, chefs on board preparing it. And that is, there's dance. I actually spent one trip last year. We were very short staffed as well. So to your point about service, listen, it's not been easy for anybody, not easy for us, not easy for anybody coming out of this. I'm optimistic that things will, get better next summer. But, I worked in the, as a dishwasher, the subaquatic ceramic technician on board one of our Gold Leaf Dome. And it was eye-opening. It was incredible. The dance that 3 people do in that back galley to prepare food for up to 70 people, and multi-course meals. Okay. So, there's I think it's a lot of experimentation beforehand that then gets refined on board. I think the other thing that's really exciting, Paul, is our addition this last year of local sourced sort of specialties. For instance, on the trip that you were on, we restocked that train with pastries, incredible pastries from a local bakery called Sweet Colorado. And they do an amazing job. Yeah, the guests love it. It's absolutely fabulous. And so I think having those local flavors and something unique to the area, maybe even synonymous with the area, give it that little extra. Did you pick up on the fact that we went through the vineyards in Colorado, which honestly, I didn't even know there were wineries in Colorado prior to doing this trip. And so we feature those wines on board the train now.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. Yeah, pulling it all together like that. Amazing. So folks will be listening to this show most likely through the Christmas holiday season. And the services are opening back up in the spring. So tell us about what we can expect when service opens back up in both in Canada and the US, and any new plans you have for the new year, other than you've already mentioned a few of them.
Well, service opens up in late April, both in Canada and the US, and then we'll run through till October. Each route has a various date, but that's generally the ballpark. And so depending on when you're interested in traveling, our peak times would be September and May, pretty much across the board. So there's value that if you're looking for a value versus a specific time, June and I would say June and even early July or late April are great times to try to look for that. For the trips this year, we're working on our interpretation in Canada. The Indigenous experience has really been something that has been important as a nation for us to go through. It's called Truth and Reconciliation. And as a nation, we're going through that right now. It's been a little painful for everyone, acknowledging, where we were and where we got to today. But the beautiful thing is, we have incredible relationships with some of the local nations that we travel through. If you think about it, our trains travel much like they did in early days. And as you travel through all these different territories, it's great to acknowledge the different territories you're going through. And there's an amazing story to be told. And it's not our story to tell, but we're working with some of the elders and the different First Nations, I said, in areas where we work to to see, what story they would like us to share, and maybe even come on board and share it with us. So I think
wonderful.
there's gonna be some really cool stuff that comes from that. Constant improvement in the food and beverage, probably the big thing from a train perspective is we're upgrading all of our AC. It's just one of those realities that we seem to be getting warmer every year or longer heat spells, and so we're working on our AC delivery systems to make sure that that's working superbly at all times of the year.
Well, Dave, again, what an experience a Rocky Mountaineer excursion train was. And for our listeners, if you want to have an experience of a lifetime, I encourage you to Google Rocky Mountaineer in Vancouver, Canada, or in Denver, Colorado, and take a look at it. It was a great experience, and there's so much I think we can learn in the public transportation rail industry, from the focus on customer service, the science, as you called it, finding out what our customers want today. A friend of mine who runs train service in Southern California always says, Paul, if people aren't buying it, we shouldn't be selling it. But if they are buying it, it's what we should be selling. And it's what you're doing there, Dave. You're up to like close to 1 million passengers in total now that have ridden the service, right?
Absolutely. And we're extremely proud of that. We have lots of raising, it's amazing the reach too. Like we have hundreds of thousands of raving fans in Australia and all over Europe, and particularly the US. I mean, our American friends, love to come up and see the Canadian Rockies, and I can't wait to show the world more of the US Rockies. It's a great match.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on what a wonderful service you're running there for people. And you've got another raving fan in me.
That's great, Paul. You know what? You're welcome up anytime, if you want to come up, and particularly if you wanted to come up to our yard in Kamloops. Love to show you around. We've got a great bunch of folks there that make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to.
That's great. Let's do that in the new year.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Transit Unplugged In Depth with our special guest, Dave McKenna, CEO of the Rocky Mountaineer. Now, next week is a very special episode. It's our year-end wrap-up here at Transit Unplugged. We have a look back at 2022 and a look ahead at 2023 for everything in public transport around the world. And we have 4 special guests for this episode. We have Rod Jones, portfolio leader and head of Modaxo Americas, the sponsor of Transit Unplugged. Jeremy Yap, deputy chief executive of LTA in Singapore. Julie Timm, CEO of Sound Transit in Seattle. And our very special guest, Mohamed Mezghani, Secretary General of UITP, all in conversation with Paul about everything going on in the future of transit and where things will be headed next year. Don't forget to go to Transit Unplugged, subscribe to the newsletter so you're always in the loop with everything going on with the show. And if you have a question, comment, or would like to be a guest on the show, email us anytime at info@transitunplugged.com. So until next year, ride safe, ride happy, and I hope everyone's had happy holidays and a prosperous new year.